Flowers rest on the front lawn of an apartment at the center of a homicide investigation. As police come and go, it's clear this is a crime scene, but there are still so many unanswered questions. The biggest, why? Why were 4-year-old Aubrey Berry and her 6-year-old sister Chloe found dead inside on Christmas Day?
At the center of this case is a question Canada was forced to confront, only after it was too late. What happens when danger is reported, documented, and still dismissed? Oak Bay, British Columbia, is known for quiet streets, oceanfront homes, and a sense of safety that rarely feels threatened. It is the kind of place where serious crime feels distant, almost unthinkable. But in December 2017, that sense of certainty collapsed. What police encountered inside a dark apartment on Christmas morning would later become one of the most disturbing child welfare failures in modern Canadian history. Not because the warning signs were invisible, but because they were seen, recorded, and ultimately set aside. This is not a story about a sudden act of violence. It is a story about process, about how family courts assess risk, about how parental rights can outweigh child safety, and about how one legal decision can quietly override years of concern. The names Chloe and Aubrey Berry would later be associated with public outrage and legislative reform. But before they became symbols, they were simply two children growing up between two very different realities. One built on protection, and another shaped by exposure. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, it is necessary to step back, long before police arrived, to the choices that placed these children in harm's way. Sarah Cotton was a well-known and respected figure in Oak Bay. She grew up in the area, graduated from the University of Victoria, and built a successful career in public relations. Organized, driven, and deeply involved in her community, Sarah was someone people trusted. In 2009, she met Andrew Berry, an economist employed by the regional ferry system connecting Vancouver Island to the mainland. Educated and professionally established, he appeared to be a stable and reliable partner. Their relationship progressed quickly. They married in 2011, and that same year welcomed their first daughter, Chloe. 2 years later, in 2013, their second daughter, Aubrey, was born. To friends and colleagues, their life looked ideal. 2 professionals, a comfortable home, and 2 young children growing up in a desirable neighborhood. But behind closed doors, that image was already beginning to fracture. By 2013, Andrew's behavior had changed noticeably. What had once seemed calm and controlled became volatile and increasingly aggressive. Arguments escalated, often centered on money and control. The tension inside the home grew impossible to ignore. The breaking point came when Sarah decided the relationship had to end. She demanded that Andrew leave the family home. Instead, the confrontation intensified. Fearing for her safety, Sarah managed to break away and call the police. When officers arrived, they determined that Andrew posed a real threat. He was removed from the home that night. Soon after, Sarah obtained a restraining order, legally preventing him from approaching her or the children. Andrew moved into a separate apartment. Sarah remained in Oak Bay with Chloe and Aubrey. For Sarah, this marked the beginning of a demanding but hopeful chapter. She worked long hours to provide stability for her daughters, often staying late at the office. Her extended family stepped in, helping with childcare and surrounding the girls with constant support. Sarah became the center of her daughters' world. They formed small traditions together: long walks along Willows Beach, time spent by the ocean, short trips to the Gulf Islands. She was determined to give them a childhood defined by calm, safety, and consistency. During this period, Andrew was denied visitation rights and ordered to pay child support. For a time, it appeared that the danger had passed. Chloe and Aubrey began to thrive. Chloe attended Christ Church Cathedral School, where she was known as a focused student with a love for drawing. Her bedroom walls were filled with her artwork. On weekends, she learned horseback riding from a cousin, a passion that quickly became central to her life. She also carried a small pink baseball bat with her name on it. It was more than a toy. It was something she cherished, a symbol of play and confidence. Aubrey, younger and full of energy, attended St. Christopher Montessori Preschool. Spirited and affectionate, she earned the family nickname, the Little Boss, always assertive, but deeply sweet. The sisters were inseparable, best friends, growing up in a home shaped by their mother's care. But behind that stability, another struggle continued. Between 2013 and 2016, Andrew accumulated significant child support debt, despite maintaining steady employment. He refused to contribute financially to his daughter's upbringing. Money, however, was not the most serious concern. In 2015, Andrew successfully challenged the restraining order. Despite his history of aggression and failure to pay support, the court granted him weekend visitation rights. Soon after, Sarah noticed troubling changes. The girls returned from visits anxious and unsettled. On one occasion, Sarah discovered a mark on Aubrey's head. When confronted, Andrew claimed the child had simply been hurt while playing. Then, in November 2015, a disclosure from one of the children raised far more serious concern. Sarah immediately contacted Child Protective Services. An investigation was opened. Andrew denied all allegations, and because there were no witnesses inside his apartment and no evidence that met the required legal threshold, the case was closed. Insufficient proof. The system stepped back, and the warning signs remained unresolved. The custody battle did not end with separation. By late 2016, Sarah Cotton once again raised serious concerns about her former husband's ability to care for their daughters. In court, she presented a detailed and troubling record. She reminded the court of the 2013 incident that ended with police intervention and Andrew being removed in handcuffs. She spoke about the unexplained mark she had found on Aubrey after visits with her father. She referenced the earlier complaints that had triggered a child protection investigation. Sarah also described episodes of clear negligence. In one instance, Andrew had left one of the girls alone in a stroller in a public place and walked away. She explained how he repeatedly spoke negatively about her in front of the children, attempting to undermine their relationship with their mother. By 2017, the case reached a critical point. Sarah pleaded with the court to restrict Andrew's access, warning that his behavior was escalating and that the children were not safe. But the outcome would prove disastrous. The case was reviewed by Judge Victoria Gray, who ultimately dismissed Sarah's concerns. The judge concluded that Andrew's past aggression was situational, a temporary reaction to domestic stress rather than a persistent risk. She placed significant weight on his professional image. To the court, Andrew remained a successful economist employed by BC Ferries, a respectable professional whose career and status were seen as indicators of stability. Sarah, by contrast, was described as overly protective, someone who exaggerated danger rather than responding to it objectively. In the written ruling, Andrew was portrayed as a loving father, capable of contributing positively to his daughters' lives. The decision granted him unsupervised custody on weekends and holidays, amounting to approximately 40% of parenting time. Chloe, then 6, and Aubrey, 4, would now spend extended periods alone with him. Andrew left the courtroom victorious. What no one there knew was that behind the image of a devoted father, his life was already unraveling. In May 2017, months before the final custody ruling, Andrew had quit his job at BC Ferries. He no longer had a stable income. What he concealed from the court was a severe gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control. He lost his savings, then his pension, then everything else. By December 2017, his financial situation was catastrophic. Debts mounted rapidly. In his apartment on Beach Drive, a prestigious location overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the electricity was cut off for non-payment. With electric heating, the loss of power meant more than darkness. The apartment became cold, unheated, and unlivable. That winter, Oak Bay was damp and bitter. Temperatures dropped to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the apartment, the cold settled quickly, turning the space into an icy enclosure. Yet when the girls returned to their mother, they spoke about it differently. They told Sarah that at their father's house they were camping, They used flashlights. They slept fully dressed, bundled up like explorers. To a child, it sounded like a game. To Sarah, the truth was clear. Camping was not a choice. It was survival in an apartment without power or heat. When preparing the girls for visits, she began packing extra layers, hats, gloves, thick clothing, knowing they would need them indoors. Still, she chose not to raise the issue immediately. The holidays were approaching, and she did not want to provoke another legal conflict or take Christmas away from her daughters. She wrote herself a note to address it later. Later never came. Under the court order, Christmas of 2017 was to be spent with their father. December 21st was Sarah's birthday. That morning, she celebrated quietly with Chloe and Aubrey. There was laughter, small gifts, and time together. But by the afternoon, she was required to drive them to Andrew's apartment. The exchange took place at his home on Beach Drive. Despite the weight in her chest, Sarah remained calm. As she drove away, she realized that Chloe had forgotten her favorite stuffed animal, a plush toy she rarely let out of her sight. Knowing how important it was, Sarah turned the car around. She knocked on the window of the ground floor apartment. The blinds parted. Sarah saw both girls inside. They were wearing festive dresses. They were smiling. They looked happy. Her heart eased. She handed over the toy, waved goodbye, and drove away. She did not know she was seeing her daughters for the last time. 3 days later, on December 24th, surveillance cameras captured a moment that would later devastate those who saw it. Andrew entered a local Fairway market with Chloe and Aubrey. He had come for one reason: to return empty bottles in exchange for a few dollars in cash. He had no money for food. The footage shows him speaking casually with another adult while his daughters stand nearby. 6-year-old Chloe clutches a large plush toy, possibly the same one her mother had returned days earlier. She appears calm, unaware, still trusting. It would be the last publicly recorded image of the two sisters alive. The children trusted their father completely. They had no way of knowing that he was standing at the edge of collapse. As they left the store that day, Chloe and Aubrey paused briefly near a notice board before stepping back out into the street. Simple, ordinary moments, the kind no one thinks twice about. Soon, those same surveillance images would be broadcast across the country. Christmas morning arrived on December 25th. Sarah Cotton woke up alone. To distract herself while waiting for her daughters to return, she focused on the small rituals of the day. She cleaned the house. She placed the remaining gifts beneath the tree. She imagined the sound of footsteps, laughter, wrapping paper tearing open. According to the custody order, Andrew was supposed to return the girls by noon. Noon passed, then 1 o'clock, then 2. Sarah called, then called again. She sent messages. None were answered. Concern quickly turned into panic. Unable to wait any longer, she drove to Andrew's apartment on Beach Drive. The windows were dark. There were no signs of activity. She knocked. She called out through the window. There was no response. Desperate, she spoke to a neighbor. What she heard made her call emergency services immediately. The neighbor said that earlier that morning, he had heard children's voices coming from the apartment. Later, closer to midday, there were loud, heavy noises, and then nothing at all. When police arrived, the apartment door was locked. With assistance from the building manager, officers entered the unit. Inside, the apartment was completely dark. The electricity had long been disconnected. The silence was unnatural. An officer used his flashlight to move through the space. In the hallway, scattered belongings lay across the floor. Among them, illuminated by the beam of light, was a small, unmistakable object. Chloe's pink baseball bat, the one with her name on it. It was no longer a toy. It had become evidence. In the bedrooms, officers found 6-year-old Chloe and 4-year-old Aubrey in their beds. At first glance, they appeared to be sleeping. Medical responders quickly confirmed the truth. Help had come too late. The only sound breaking the silence came from the bathroom. Following it, Police found Andrew Barry, unconscious and critically injured. His condition was serious but survivable. As paramedics worked to stabilize him, he briefly regained consciousness. He did not ask about his daughters. He did not ask if they were safe. Instead, he made a quiet request that they not be saved. Outside, Sarah tried desperately to reach the apartment. Officers had to hold her back as they delivered the devastating news. Chloe and Aubrey were not coming home. Their Christmas presents would remain unopened.
A devastating incident. That's how the Vancouver Island Integrated Major Crime Unit is describing the death of two young girls found murdered in the Victoria suburb of Oak Bay. Police reported finding the bodies of two deceased girls as well as an injured man at an address on Beach Drive on Christmas Day, with local media reporting them as 6-year-old Chloe Berry and her 4-year-old sister Aubrey. Their father, Andrew Berry, was taken to hospital with injuries under police guard. Talking to the Canadian press, a family friend described one of the girls as a happy child with a huge smile.
Aubrey just really came into her own, really, just in the last, 6 months, really, since going back to preschool in September. And she just had a really good sense of who she was as a person. And she kind of was just making that change from being, more of a toddler into being a kid, I guess. And she was silly. She was lots of fun. She was always laughing. She has a huge smile.
The Vancouver Island Integrated Major Crime Unit issued a statement confirming the deaths as homicides, also stating that no further suspects are being sought after the father was taken into custody. It's a situation that, according to one Victoria reporter, has left local residents shocked and confused.
Just shock. I spoke with a woman in the building who just would see the father and the girls quite often. She said he looked happy, a dedicated father, and loved spending time with the girls. And she said, she did acknowledge that he was having some financial difficulties. There was confirmation from neighbors that his hydro had been cut off recently, and so there are concerns about his financial problems and how that contributed to his level of stress.
Flowers rest on the front lawn of an apartment at the center of a homicide investigation. As police come and go, it's clear this is a crime scene, but there are still so many unanswered questions. The biggest, why? Why were 4-year-old Aubrey Berry and her 6-year-old sister Chloe found dead inside on Christmas Day?
Horrible. You can't even understand how things like this can happen in the world.
Sandra Hudson saw the two girls just last week. She said they were bubbling with excitement about Christmas. Then on Monday night, she received a hysterical phone call.
I got a call to come to the Oak Bay police station when I was on my way home from Christmas dinner on Christmas Day. And when I got there, we were told that Chloe and Aubrey had passed away. It was the worst thing I've ever heard in my life.
Hudson is friends with the girl's mother and has been with her since. Neighbors, now in shock, recall seeing a family that appeared happy.
It was just a family that was nice. Interactions were very minimal. The dad and kids, they seemed happy. The kids, I saw them the other day, they were playing and happy.
The girl's father, Andrew Berry, is now in hospital with undisclosed injuries. Police are calling the girl's deaths homicide, but say they aren't looking for any suspect.
Andrew survived. Once his condition stabilized, he was arrested. At trial, he denied responsibility. He told the jury an elaborate story, claiming that unknown attackers connected to gambling debts had entered the apartment and carried out the crime. According to him, a mysterious man named Paul was behind everything. The story collapsed under evidence. Investigators confirmed that Paul did not exist. A handwritten letter found in the apartment told a different story, one filled with anger, resentment, and blame, directed at Sarah, his parents, and the world around him. Forensic evidence further contradicted his account. Footprints throughout the apartment matched only one person, Andrew himself. There was no indication that anyone else had been present. Additional forensic findings confirmed his involvement beyond any doubt. After lengthy proceedings, the jury reached a verdict. In 2019, Andrew Berry was found guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole for 22 years. The verdict brought legal closure. but it could not fill the silence that settled permanently in Sarah's home.
It's a mixture of relief and sadness, really, that we heard from some of the people sitting in the gallery today. As we said earlier, people gasping and throwing themselves back in the chairs as the jury foreperson announced two verdicts of guilty of second-degree murder against Andrew Berry in the killings of his two daughters, Chloe and Aubrey, in Christmas 2017. We spoke earlier with Valerie Jerome. She is a friend of Sarah Cotton, the girls' daughters. She calls it relief and calls it justice. Here she is.
They were very, very sweet little girls, and the last time I saw little Aubrey, she, was missing her two front teeth, and she was looking forward to going to kindergarten. I guess I saw them on the Labor Day weekend before they started at their new schools, and they were keen about starting their new schools. It was just lovely to see their joy.
A father convicted of murdering his two daughters in Oak Bay on Christmas Day in 2017 has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for at least 22 years. The decision was read by a BC Supreme Court judge in Victoria Thursday morning. Andrew Berry was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder back in September. The bodies of 4-year-old Aubrey and her 6-year-old sister Chloe were found in Berry's apartment on December 25th, 2017. Berry was also found naked in the bathtub with stab wounds. The girl's mother released a statement after the sentencing saying in part, "I do not believe that Andrew, who has shown no remorse and a complete disregard for the lives of our daughters, should ever get a second chance." She criticized the legal system and the Ministry of Children and Family Development, adding, "I did everything in my power to keep my children safe. I can only hope that changes will be made throughout the family law system so that tragedies such as ours do not happen again."
The case sent shockwaves far beyond Oak Bay. Canadians were not only horrified by the crime itself, but by the systemic failures that allowed it to happen. Despite public outrage, no disciplinary action was taken against the judge or the professionals involved. But the law did change. On March 1st, 2021, major amendments to Canada's Divorce Act came into force. For the first time, the law formally recognized coercive control, psychological abuse, financial manipulation, and threats as factors courts must consider in custody decisions. Parental rights were no longer placed above child safety. Sarah Cotton described the reform as a critical step forward, one she hoped would protect other children from similar harm. Today, she continues to live in memory of her daughters. Chloe is remembered as a creative, gentle child who loved art and horses. Aubrey is remembered as spirited and joyful, a little girl who led with confidence and laughter. Their lives were short, but their impact changed the laws of an entire country. And that is the legacy of Chloe and Aubrey Berry. Thank you for staying with the story until the end. Remembering these cases matters, because awareness is the first step toward prevention.